Okay, we're back for more. So I love what you said when we left off that it's the workshop is chaos. And then I loved what you said during our little private break about how when you and Becky got married, is that right? That
Yep.
the person that married you asked Becky if you were ready, if she was ready for chaos, and then asked you if you were ready for order.
Oh no, no! It was we were consciously walking into it. Are you prepared to enter into chaos? Not that it might show up, but that you're going to definitely walk right into it.
I think that describes you and Becky perfectly at the workshop, because this last workshop you weren't there, Becky, and we were all commenting about the moments that you would be there to place order into the chaos. So
And then, God bless her soul, really tried to be a surrogate Becky, but there's just things that she couldn't anticipate that you're clearly aware of that even I am not aware of. Chaos is looked upon in our culture as bad, as something is wrong, as we need to fix the chaos, adjust the chaos, medicate the chaos, therapize the chaos, push away or put in a room or a space the chaos, because it's bad, it's scary, it's not very understandable, and it's messy, right? And instead, we opt out of that and we move into a state of static, of order, of everything in a box, of no movement, but knowledge of where everything is always. Right? So if we move chaos from bad into a divine state, right? We move that into a grace state. What it says then is, I had a belief. I realized it was wrong. Right? So in that moment of awareness, we have ego deflation at depth. That means I was wrong. Everything I believed was incorrect. And the next moment is going to bring awareness, which is knowledge and understanding of something new and different. Order. Right? But it's new order. It's a different order. So from chaos comes order. It's the only thing that can. And ultimately, from order comes chaos. Because what we brought to the beginning of that dance, that beginning of that moment of stepping into chaos, was an old order. It was an old way of thinking, an old way of being. And we brought that to the chaos to become different, right? So if we stop looking at chaos as the boogeyman and start looking at it as a catalyst or something of the divine, an opportunity to move from one place to another, that it's not a state to stay in, which is where I stayed for a long time, but it's not a state to stay in, but it's a state to transition through to the next moment, to the next choice. And it's going to be different than my old choice because that's why I entered the chaos.
I like that also because it makes me think about, maybe someone that has order in their life, but is afraid to do something new because that is the chaos, And when you're talking about, order and chaos together, it's like it just reminds me of a yin and a yang, and that, the both of them are necessary for one or the other to survive. And, I like that way of thinking because it's unavoidable. If I ignore it, it's still going to exist. It's just going to exist like as a rampant tornado inside of me emotionally, or I can just, accept that it's there in front of me and like walk through it. Is basically
step into it. Yeah. Step into the tornado. Step into the chaos. And therefore come out the other side new and different. The chaos is gone. It's no longer required. Right? It was there because something was wrong. Because the order was too strict. The order was too restrictive. The box was too tight. I was becoming more than the box itself. I brought the box to chaos. Chaos blew the box up and then gave me a brand new box to work with on the other side.
Nice, yeah.
Right? Bigger, wider, more gadgets to do the things that I wanted to do, but I'm still going to be able to operate my vehicle with my order and my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you think about it, or at least if I think about it like that, I can think about it, especially in terms of a car, right? So, or chapters in a book. I have these different chapters in my life, and each new chapter can be just that. It can be a new chapter, like one chapter of chaos, one chapter of new car, like, and I can always upgrade or downgrade if I want to. But, that's one of the appeals to me about continuing to go back to the workshops is things keep getting better, also more exciting and new, and, I definitely feel like I'm consistently upgrading, in my life, whether it be with awarenesses and like when we talked about the voices of old people and negative self-talk, I definitely feel like my negative self-talk has amplifiers now, but I need them to have a microphone in my head so that I can be aware of them, because my chaos was dealt with by ignoring it, and so I just never listened to what was happening, but they were still there, talking all the time, never shutting up, and that was worse to deal with than now this new place of my life where I can hear crazy thoughts and go, wow, that's a really crazy thought. And instead of having it be my enemy, it's like my best friend that just has terrible ideas. Like she just has the worst ideas. Like, hey, that bar's open at 4:00 in the morning. We didn't know there was a bar open at 4:00 in the morning in Florida. Like, yeah. And we did that in South Carolina. And so we're not going to do that now. Let's drive to the meeting. That's still really funny, but a horrible idea, So that's kind of the new relationship that I'm seeing in myself. And I like that, though. I don't want to get rid of my old addict, so to speak. I just want to laugh at her insane behavior. Now that I'm not smuggling booze in my house, I'm smuggling Taco Bell in my backpack instead. It's still the same behavior, just different things. So, and I trust that, and I've seen that when I come back for more, things do get better. I'm not smuggling Taco Bell in my backpack anymore, worried about the neighbors knocking on my door, shaming me for my eating habits or whatever crazy thing that's going on in my wild mind. But And I can laugh at that, and I don't have to be threatened and beat myself down by either crazy thoughts or crazy actions. I'm more forgiving to myself as I go through the process. So
I think I realized that to not have an expectation for those voices to go away. When I realized probably 8 or 9 years into not drinking, that I thought about a drink every day. I thought about a drink when I was going to AA. I thought about a drink when I wasn't going to AA. I thought about a drink when I was at workshop. I thought about a drink when I wasn't at workshop. I thought about a drink when I was happy. I thought about a drink when I was sad. Every single day I thought about a drink. Well, and you think to yourself, someday that's got to go away, right? It's like, no, it doesn't have to go away. When it happens, one of my buddies used to talk about Ram Dass all the time. And Ram Dass used to talk about when you have these thoughts, when you have these every now and again jump into your head crazy thoughts, it's like, don't shoo them away. Don't block them out. Don't pretend they're not talking. You can invite them in for tea. Have a seat. Let's hang out for a minute. Let's talk. Obviously, you're here for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. Something must have just happened for you to show up, right?
Yeah.
So for me, when we should have a drink, shows up, it's like, was that because I was scared, angry, lonely, tired, triggered, messed up, jacked up? Or is it because we're celebrating, because we had a new baby, because the sun rose? Why? What's happening here, right? So what's the discovery? And if the discovery is simply, that's our neighbor. If the discovery is simply that I'm having that thought again, great. But if the discovery is I was triggered, and that's why I'm having the thought, well, then I can address the triggering.
I think there's a lot of people that I get the impression from workshop that, particularly if they've had a trauma throughout their lives when they were children, that they don't even realize until they do the work that those voices aren't just normal, or that they're even having, they don't even have that recognition that this is going on. And that helps a lot of people, I think, to say, they don't recognize the voice and are able to address it until they do the work. And then they realize that that's not normal. That's not, these beat yourself up voices are not how it's supposed to be. There's other, at the basis of everybody is a peaceful, loving human being. We all start out the same in the very beginning, and so many people come to the workshop that they never knew, they never thought about that they don't have to have those voices in their head, that those things are just, so it helps them recognize that that's not normality, that stuff going on.
Well, I don't know about, for me, I think that is pretty normal, but I also think that it was really normal for me to ignore it. I mean, when I think about how I was raised, I was raised neglected. People ignored me. I was just a kid, and they, it wasn't important in their adult world. And so I ended up doing that same thing to myself, but I like what you said, Scott, about, invited in for tea, because it gives me a place to, create an awareness. The thing that happened with me recently with that bar thought was, I recognize that I'm doing really well in my life right now, and I want to self-sabotage because, the first thing that popped in my head was, who else is doing all this work? And like, I got all resentful, like, who else is doing all this stuff? I just wrote all my workouts down for a week, and I'm going to, like, take a look at what I'm eating, and, like, this is crap, like, I don't want to do all this. Like, let's just go and screw it all up right now. And it was interesting because just a few days before that, I was driving to go on my beach walk. I go with a friend in the morning, and I had finally woken up at 3, not finally woken up at 3:30, but I woke up at 3:30. I didn't hear from her yet. And so I started writing for podcasts. I started typing on my computer and getting some work done, and it was great. And I've been wanting to do that for years, but I drove past the gym at 4:00 in the morning, and I started harping on myself about not being at the gym because it's Sunday and nobody's at the gym now, and you want to go when nobody's there, and now you're up and you're not there, and blah, blah, blah. It just was a mess. And I caught myself and I went, whoa, how about a little pat on the back for what you did do? Because that was huge. And you've been wanting to do that for years as well. Like, not everything is going to happen overnight. I'm not going to wake up and be future me. Not, it's not going to happen. Eventually I will, but not tomorrow. I'm working on future me. I'm doing little tiny things every day to build that person. But I am grateful that, nowadays I can have those conversations. I can have tea with the negative part of myself, and figure out, like, it isn't because I want to celebrate. It isn't because somebody passed or something bad happened. It's because things are going really well. And I think that is a huge point of awareness for me, because, that's like it's giant, you know. I mean, I want to self-sabotage. And when everything's going good, I had a therapist in California say to me, do you ever think that you quit just before the miracle happened? You know? And so that's what that reminds me of. It's like, I'm so willing to, you know, jump out of the pool right before something amazing happens, because I'm scared, because, you know, all the scary things that are uncomfortable really, but I'm used to them, are, you know, something I'm used to. I can handle that. I know what to expect. I know how to defend myself. I know how to do this and that. And, you know, and I get this thrill from escaping death and dangerous situations, but, you know, having joy, like, that's a little bit much, you know, like, that's terrifying. Feeling safe, you know, like, that's a scary thing. Being successful, having people respect me, like, those are terrifying things for someone like me that's been, you know, like, that's all foreign to me. So, yeah, I like that whole idea of the chaos and order, because it's not happening overnight for me, but it's certainly, I'm seeing that process unfold. And I definitely think that it was like a catapult. You know, that's my experience, is every time I do a workshop, I'm catapulted to this new level of, you know, these little awarenesses and stuff. And I know that we write down all these different things when we get there about what we want. And I remember one of the things I wrote was to turn the volume on my intuition. And until we had this conversation today, I never realized that my intuition and the volume is also those negative self-talk things and bantering back and forth. That is just as much my intuition as my gut saying, don't go this route, go another route. You know?
Well, I think some of our biggest discernments have to be what voice is fear, what voice is intuition, because they sound the same.
Mm.
They are our voice.
Yeah.
Right? So when we hear that voice, and it's the voice of fear, it's always going to be telling us about what we're not.
Mm.
And when we hear the voice of intuition, it's always going to be talking about what's possible.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
So fear is going to say, let's not do that. Let's stay safe. We'll be over here and we'll watch what happens. We'll still be a part of it, but we'll watch and we'll see if it's safe. Whereas intuition says, that's the next thing I need to do. I can feel it. I'm walking towards it and knowing this is my next. This is the place that I'm supposed to be. Right? I got to Haiti in 2009 on a cruise. And right as I got to the beach, when we got there, these people came down on a zip line, 4 of them. And I was like, well, that's crazy. And I looked up the hill, and there's on top of a mountain, there's the zip line, and the whole thing is over water. So I later find out it's the longest zip line over water in the world. But I say out loud, well, that's just crazy. And one of the people who was with me is like, so why is that crazy? I was like, well, it's a perfectly good mountain. What are you jumping off for it on a zip line for? That's nuts. So she asked me, are you afraid? I was like, well, yes, of course I am. She said, sounds like it's your next. Right? So fear was saying, don't do that, you'll die. And intuition was saying, that's next, because you can't live in fear.
Hmm.
And I listened to the intuition, because once I identified everything that was going on, it was a perfectly safe scenario for me to address that fear. So I did. And then I spent the rest of the time on the cruise leaning over the railings to see if the fear was still really gone. Now, every time I get over the 7th floor, I lean over the balcony to see if the fear is still gone. And it is. It doesn't live here anymore. Because I followed the intuition, which overcame the fear, at the same time as fear was saying, don't do that, you'll die. You could die. You might die. Someone has died doing this.
Hmm.
And all those things are true and real.
Yeah.
Except for the part where it's perfectly safe and you're afraid and it's time to step through this fear. And That's what intuition said. And from that moment of saying, okay, I'm going to do this, chaos. Right? And then I get up on the zip line, and it's really going off. My mind is like, what are you, cussing, cursing, all kinds of stuff happening in my mind, right?
Yeah.
There's 4 of us, right? But there's 4 things, but there's only 2 of us, me and another guy. And he's totally cool. His thing, he's got his camera, he's ready to go, he's shooting the whole thing. We get on the zip line, we jump off, and I start screaming. He's doing his camera thing, right? He pans over to me. White guy screaming, right? Comes back over, he's panning. About halfway down, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I just stopped screaming. And I looked around and I breathed and I looked down and I saw fish and sharks and things swimming around in the water, rocks. I kept breathing. I looked at the guy next to me. He smiled. He waved. It was powerful moving from chaos to order and having it happen on a zip line, going down, and right in the middle of it, it all fell off. Inviting it in for tea.
That's awesome. Well, I think that now we should get into what you guys do. I mean, I know that you're also referred to as the foot guy. And Becky, because of the last, the Spirit Fest that I just went to, I didn't know you had a book until then. I was like, oh my God, this is Becky's book. So whomever wants to start first, let's talk about that stuff.
Well, like I said in the beginning, I was a wildlife ecologist on the Space Center for 35 plus years, and that's what I went to school for, and it's really more than a profession for me. It's what I am. It's that part of my life is what's in me. So I love that, which was one of the reasons that retiring was somewhat terrifying. And I worked on that in workshops and assistant a little bit. But about, let's see, my oldest granddaughter's going to be 12 in August. When she was getting ready to turn 7, I thought that I would get her a life list for birds. Now, if you're a real birder, you go around and whenever you see a new species of bird, you write it in your life list. You check it off, and people people spend lots of time and money and equipment and traveling and all this stuff to get all these birds, go see new birds. Well, I thought, well, I'll just get her a little life list and she can start, right? She can start and I'll take her out, we'll go birding. And I couldn't find one for kids. They were all just printed off lists with no pictures or anything. So I wrote a life list for kids, got pictures in it and maps and all the birds in it. There's 20 birds in it, and they all occur somewhere in the continental United States during some time of the year. So a kid in California can use it, or a kid in Michigan, or a kid in Florida. So it took me 3 years. That was one of the good things that happened during COVID was I finished the book because I was working full time and doing the pod and doing workshops and stuff. I didn't have a whole lot of time to devote to it, but it was definitely a priority, and I got it done. And it's been out about a year now, a little over a year. So
Awesome.
So I've got that.
Cool.
It's fun. And then when we go and do Spirit Fest and things, I am Mrs. Foot Guy.
Mrs. Foot Guy.
Yeah, because well, there's got to be some order.
Yeah. Yes.
In that process.
You are the order. I like it. Yeah. All right. Well, Mr. Foot Guy. Let's talk about that. Mr. Foot Guy.
So same scenario. I think COVID afforded us an opportunity to write and finish my book as well. It kind of occurred a little differently than Becky's did, in that I paced back and forth, and really Becky wrote the book. And she would read it back to me. I was like, no, that's not it. And then I would say it again, and then we'd hone down and find the right words. And then we had an amazing editor, her sister, and my mentor, and her sisters really helped us with the structure and the order and how it shows up. And my mentor was like, "You're complicating this. Let's simplify it. Remember, you're talking to regular people." And Becky helped me with that too. But Foot Guy, really started, 24 years ago. In 1989, I became a reflexologist. I picked it up as an adjunct therapy to go along with my wife at the time. We owned an acupuncture center in Merritt Island. And that was the therapy that I chose to do in the office to, contribute my part. And eventually, for a whole bunch of different reasons, we went our separate ways. The business went away. And until I married Becky, I really didn't do reflexology on anyone other than my kids. So at some point, August of our first year of marriage, I came home and it was time for me not to go back. And
to the restaurant business.
Yes, to the restaurant business. And so Becky, asked me point blank, "Is there not something else you can do?" And I said, "Well, I can rub beef, but it's going to take me ages to start that business." She's like, "Great, let's do that. Because this isn't fun anymore." So that's when Foot Guy was born. The concept was created years before that, sitting on my patio talking with my buddy. But the concept of the old knife sharpeners, mostly in the Northeast. In my experience, it was an old Italian guy. He wore all black, a little black hat, and he walked through the neighborhood with a pulling a cart behind him that he ultimately turned into a knife sharpening station, right? But he would ring a bell walking through the neighborhood. And all of the moms would gather up all of their shears and knives, and the dads would quickly go outside and take the blade off of the lawnmower, and then we'd all go to the end of the driveway, and he'd stop somewhere in the middle of the neighborhood, and everybody would congregate around him, and he would get 25 cents a blade. And he flipped his little cart around, and he started pedaling that thing, and the stone would go, and he'd start working. Then he'd wrap it all back up, start carrying it again, ringing his bell, walking down the street to the next neighborhood. So I wanted to create a concept where I could be a mobile reflexologist, that I could show up at your door with everything that I needed in one trip, walk in your house, do a session, pack up everything, and you would never know I was there. So I just finally designed a system where I had a stool, a chair, and my little medicine box that I carried all my tools and oils in, and that became the Foot Guy. And it grew and grew and became a kind of a neat concept. And ultimately, I wrote education around that to give to providers who might want to use reflexology in their business. And then we took that piece and we made a book around it and added into that self-care. A deeper look, bringing in some of those workshop concepts of mirror work and journaling and looking for the emotional cause of physical illness, and wrapping all of that up into a concept that practitioners can use, and then when we created the book, that regular lay people could identify and start to look at for themselves or for their family. So that's kind of Foot Guy and emotive reflex method, which is what we ultimately named the Foot Guy technique for regular folks, because there's not many female reflexologists that want to be called the Foot Guy or even use the Foot Guy technique. So we gave it a new name and named the book that, and that came out June 19th of last year.
Awesome.
So its birthday is coming up.
Yay. Nice. And does that have because you said you have oils and all that goody stuff, does that have, those kind of aromatherapy sort of things in there as well, or is it just the acupuncture techniques and like what it's all about to have things emotionally stored in the body? Is that kind of what it covers? Or
So it's 5 pieces. Reflexology identifies where energy is stuck in the body by finding the places of congestion in the feet or the hands. They identify as congestion in the body. We use the oils so we can dig in there a little deeper. Most of what I use the essential oils for is topical application directly to the reflex on purpose to move it one way or another. Ultimately, there's going to be a component of aromatherapy that always goes with it because I end every session with the same oil, and that oil is very on purpose from an aromatherapy place. Once we've found the areas of congestion in the body, I apply the concepts of Louise Hay and 2 other women from Europe and from Australia. We put together an emotions template that really gives us a clear understanding of what those areas of congestion represent from an emotional place, what our thinking or our emotions caused in our body. It's actually our body trying to speak to us. So really, I'm kind of an interpreter. I interpret what the body is trying to say, and then I give that back to the person. We knew it was happening when I would come home from work, and Becky's like, "So how'd it go today?" I was like, "Everybody cried. I don't know what's going on." And finally, I realized that as I was working, I was simply intuitively using everything I'd learned in the workshop with my clients. And because they had something stuck in their shoulder or in their gallbladder or in their leg, I knew the emotional causes and the mental processes that brought them to that place automatically because I'd studied it.
mm-hmm.
So I intuitively just spoke those words. And of course, it's always right.
Yeah.
So the emotion would flood from it. And then I use tuning forks and wellness spheres, a product that I created myself, to help release those energies then from the feet, and then as a direct result, reflexively from the body as well. We no longer need to have that congestion or discomfort in the body. We've listened, right?
Yeah.
We bantered about it. We owned it. There's a witness now to this stuff that's going on in your head. Now we can release it. It's no longer needed. We have the information.
Yeah. I like to say, and I don't know when this came to me, but I think it's when I realized that, I agreed with Eastern medicine where, they believe that physical ailments are because of emotional dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like popped in my head of this idea of your body is like a roadmap and your emotions are like the signals, the street signs, that's the way I think of it now. I think about, my emotions are a guide to tell me what's going on in my body and vice versa. So that's cool. I like that. I don't want to skip out on this other topic, which is the pod, which I actually have no clue what that's about. I have no clue what the pod is, but I know that you mentioned it to me, and I also know that we're easily filling up time, which is awesome. So let's talk about the pod before we run out of time for that.
The POD stands for People of Diversity.
Okay.
There was a group of us going to a Unity church, a local Unity church, and it became a little too restrictive for what we wanted our spiritual walk to be. And the minister left and created the pod. That was in 2006. So it's been a spiritual community since 2006. She eventually left, that minister left and went back to a Unity church. And we've had other ministers. But now we transitioned in 2019,
Yep.
is that right? 2019 to a multi-faith format. So what we have are 10 different speakers from 10 different faith perspectives. We have, help me here, a Baha'i, a Buddhist, a Wiccan, a shaman, Vedic yoga, a rabbi, a Native American, some more. Okay.
So, sorry, I have to do it this way. We have the Abrahamic religions. So we have Baha'i,
Right.
Judaism, Islam, New Thought, and Melchizedek Christianity.
Right.
Then we have the Eastern religions. We have Vedic yoga, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism right now,
Right.
Wiccan,
Shamanism,
and Native American.
Native American. There you go. That's the 10. But at the beginning of each series, each 10-week series, we give the speakers a topic. And some of the topics we've had have been diversity, oneness, transformation, suffering, just usually one word, one concept, and that's all we give them. And they each take a week and put together a message on that topic from their faith perspective. And then we have 10 groups of 10 sets of positive artist musicians. They send in a couple of music videos. The speakers send in their talk. Scott and I do a little video at the beginning that plays at the beginning of the service and at the end of the service. And we send it all to our tech guy, and he puts it together. And we're completely virtual. We don't meet in person anymore. We started doing that during COVID, but it's being virtual has expanded our reach so much. One of our speakers is from New York. A lot of our musicians are from all over the country, people that we wouldn't be able to have if we met in person. So we have the services on Sunday on Facebook Live at 10:30 and 5:45. We rebroadcast that morning service. So it's been a trip.
Awesome. Yeah, that
It's
sounds
been
really cool.
really, really cool. And Scott always says this, but I'm going to steal it. It's a way. We're not trying to convince anyone, and none of the speakers try to convince anyone to come to their religion, there's none of that. Everybody, the speakers included, and us especially, look at it as a way of learning things and being exposed to things that help us expand our spiritual walk. If somebody were to ask me now what I am spiritually, I just have to say I am a whole bunch of stuff, because every single week I get something that I can take and use in my life and it's just been very, very powerful. I love it. I love it. You want to add something?
It's been, I guess, kind of an internal, vision for me for a long time. I had a fairly rough childhood, and high school was a bit of a blur. There was one class that I got an A in all of high school. It's the only class that I remember being in every time I was there, and that is world religions. It impacted me in a way that never really went away, even though I became one of those angry anti-religion drunks. There was always a piece of me that knew that there were many paths to one divinity, that I could watch my brother's spiritual walk, and in witnessing that, see something that he or she is doing that I can bring to my spiritual walk, which can be totally different than theirs, but then by doing that practice in my walk, grow my walk, grow my faith, grow my understanding of the God of my understanding, because I was willing to see my brother in his spiritual walk and honor the fact that he had a way of doing something that was inspired. And if I did that too, I too would be inspired to be closer to the God of my understanding. I had ulterior motives, right? So when we were talking about this, we were trying to figure out how not to become a slave to trying to find a speaker and a topic for every week, week after week after week after week after week. What could we do that would give us the reflection of what we were trying to do and have that burden not sit primarily on Becky, but on us to continually create that? When we started, we only had 5 or 6 faith perspectives, and it has grown to 10. We've had musicians, big time, national folks who've got multiple CDs hung out with us all through COVID, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm buried busy. I can't do this anymore." And it's in like almost a miraculous manner. New people, new speakers, new musicians have just filled in those spots, and they get it, and they are totally into what we're doing, and they want to be a part of it, and the vibe has just stayed really high, and real excited about what we're doing because it's neat, it's different. We're not much like Becky's, birders, first birders life list. We look around and we just don't see it. We see people doing interfaith, we see people doing multi-faith, but not as a weekly Sunday service dedicated to being multi-faith as the purpose of meeting.
I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of this whole experience is every single week I'm just amazed at how different one topic and how different every single talk is. How each speaker comes at it from a different place, but then at the end of it, I'm like, oh, we are all one. We are all heading in the same direction. Many paths, one divinity. It's just
freaky.
Yeah, it is amazing.
How connected each talk at the end shows up, this interconnectedness to the next talk or the last talk, and yet the road they travel to get there, completely different.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
It's as soon as you guys were talking about it, it's like you said, the God of my understanding. It's like that on steroids. Like,
yes.
Right. Yeah.
It's and I love that it's 10 different faiths and different perspectives. But like you said, it all comes to the same ending, or not ending, but destination.
Outcome, right.
Yes, outcome. I feel like we could do this forever. So I definitely won't be opposed to doing this again anytime.
Yes.
I want to get your guys's, I'm sure you have a website. I know you've got Facebook links and stuff like that. So I'm going to put that in the description box so that people can just click on it and get linked up to you guys. There is, I feel like, one more thing that I wanted to mention. There is. So speaking of the spirituality, you guys both are ordained ministers, or one or both,
Right.
Okay. So
I am not.
But is that going to be on the website or on your Facebook to get linked up with that kind of thing as well, or?
For other folks to become ordained?
No,
or...
for them to take use of your services.
So all of the websites and Facebook pages that are out there have access to us.
Okay.
We do mentoring, we do classes, we do workshops, obviously, but neither one of us are in a place where we do like individual one-on-one counseling per se. I'm always honored when people ask me for that. Again, I've got amazing therapist friends out there who do it for a living, and they're really, really good at it, and they're passionate about it. I'm happy always to mentor people, to work with people, to spend time with people. But that's my separation. More mentoring and guidance, and I'm training 2 people to take over the workshop. I'm working with a couple of guys. I'm working with a couple of gals, just doing one-on-one mentoring work. But yeah, I always push them to actual professionals.
Okay, well, I've got like 15, but I'm counting down my seconds now. But I will make sure that everybody has all that information to get a hold of you guys and get linked up with the workshop at the bottom of this. And I'm not going to do my outro because I'm out of time. Thank you for joining us.